You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Oh, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson, and of course, each week we bring you important and useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And I just want to really thank everybody for all their support you've given us. So many of you have shared our show with friends and family, and we've grown through the years because of you. So I just want to thank you for that. So many of you have gone to our website at boomerstodayradio.com. Many of you just listen on your iPhone or Android phone. We, of course, have our free app, our Boomers Today app, but you could also listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, so many different stations. So a lot of great options to listen to it, and I just want to thank you all for that. I think our list is growing each and every day because we have some great guests on the show, and today is no different. We have with us on our show today Daniel Kennedy. Daniel is a healthcare executive, counselor, author, and filmmaker. His passion for disease prevention was ignited professionally while working with thousands of cancer patients at Oasis of Hope Hospital, and personally by witnessing the cancer and heart disease related deaths of his grandmother, uncle, aunt, and father. Through the process of writing and ghostwriting 12 books on cancer and heart health, Daniel honed the skills necessary to create, write, and direct the 8-episode Healthy Long Life documentary series, which we're going to hear more about. His relationships with researchers and clinicians developed over the last 3 decades have given him access to the world's top experts on healthy life expectancy. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. I really appreciate it.
Frank, it is my pleasure, and it's an honor to be here. And I'm really excited to be able to share the information that I've been compiling by traveling the world for the last 4 years. And I just really want to get this information from the researchers and academia into the hands of real people that can benefit from it. So it's kind of what I consider my job to be, is this connector or this bridge and a little bit of a translator, because, medicine and science, they can get really, really complex in the first sentence that a doctor or a researcher says. So I try to break it down into terms that anyone can understand and then apply.
Well, I think it's fantastic what you're doing. So thank you for what you're doing. I know that in reading a little bit about you and what you're doing, I know your philosophy is that it's not good enough to live a long, sick life when there's the opportunity to live a healthy, long life. That's what I know you've written. So tell us a little bit more as far as the difference between life expectancy and a healthy, long life. Talk to us about that a little bit more.
I'd like to share that with you and just start off by saying that, this philosophy of I don't want to live a long, sick life if I can live a long, healthy life comes just from my close relationship with my father, who became my best friend as we were adults. And I watched him, the last 15 years of his life. I would joke with my dad and I just say, you're a very important person, because I look at your agenda and everyone you're meeting with are doctors. So, wow, you must be very prestigious. But, what I'm really joking is that he just had medical appointment after medical appointment after medical appointment. And my dad had cancer, actually 3 different types of cancer. And he passed away almost 2 years ago from congestive heart failure. So, it's like he ordered the works to happen on him. And so I'm looking at that, and I come across from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and also the World Health Organization, that they are not only tracking your expected years of life or life expectancy, which now in the US is almost up to 79 years, which is, incredibly great. It's growing. But they're also tracking the healthy life expectancy, which really got my attention. And so the healthy life expectancy are the years that you are expected to enjoy good health, which I would want the same 79 years or more. Unfortunately, the healthy life expectancy in the United States is not even 70 years. It's under 69 years. It's like 68.86 years, where your life expectancy is 10 years more than that. So basically what's being projected is what I saw my father live, my uncle, my aunt, my grandmother, that you mentioned in the beginning. Their last 10 years of life was just really filled with sickness, pain, and crushing medical diseases. And so, or medical bills. And so I'm sitting here thinking, well, is that just genetics? Is that what going to happen to me? Is that my life's destiny? And what about my children and someday my grandchildren? Are we all on a genetic path to getting heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, cancer? There's nothing we can do about it. Just go to the doctor, be a good soldier, and take those prescriptions. And so I went out to talk to the world's top experts, but I also went to, the famous blue zones.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
It's
was
interesting,
invited
blue
into
zones. Yeah.
many, many homes of people. And I would just interview normal people, but that were living into their 90s, but still going to work because they felt that great. And so my documentary series, Healthy Long Life, shares those stories. So I love it because it's this mix of, okay, here's what the researchers from the World Health Organization say, or from Cornell University, all these famous researchers, here's what they say. But now let's talk to these people. One incredible experience I had was to be in the personal home of a woman who turned 100 years old in Tokyo. I was invited to be there and film when the governor of Tokyo came to give her the recognition of reaching 100 years old healthy. And that was just wonderful. And to see that in that culture in Japan, that the governor of Tokyo actually celebrates people when they turn 100 and they're healthy. So that's really, really what my work was, is what can we do, if anything at all, to live a healthy, long life? Because science and medicine, my hat's off to them. They've managed to increase the health or the life expectancy up to almost 80 years. That's great. But medicine is only fighting disease. It's not promoting health. Right. And health promotion, there's so much that we can do. And that's what I really want to share with people.
So your travels, I know you mentioned Blue Zone, which I'm, familiar with. You've been to several countries. I know that's highlighted on your website, which will give you the opportunity to share with everybody. But have you come across areas within our own country that is kind of along the lines of what you've seen in other countries? Are there parts of our country that are different than other parts? I mean, we live in a big country, all right? A lot of different.
That's right. Like in Florida, the Fountain of Youth, maybe there. One place that I did visit and did some interviews is Loma Linda, California, where I spoke with Dr. Hans Deal of the Lifestyle Medicine Institute. And in fact, that area of Loma Linda is recognized as a blue zone. So there are more people living in Loma Linda that are healthy and reaching 100 years old than anywhere else in the United States.
Interesting.
And where what we see, it may not be obvious at first, but there's a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists there. And you think, oh, so religion is making them, healthy. That's the religion. Well, the thing about Seventh-day Adventists is they very much integrate healthy lifestyle into their teachings, and especially plant-based diets. And so that's really what I was finding in other places as well. So I love it because you don't have to just go to Sardinia, which is the centenarian capital of the world for men, or Okinawa, which is the centenarian capital of the world for women. You don't have to go there. You can create your own blue zone, because the blue zone is really not about where you're living. It's about how you're living.
Right.
And it goes a lot further than just what you're eating. And so there's so much that you can do to create your own healthy long life.
But don't you think that, though, if you're in your own community, if you're surrounded by people that have similar thinking, it certainly helps, I would think, versus trying to do it alone.
Yeah, it really does, because we are social creatures, and we just tend to kind of go with whatever is happening. Choose your friends wisely.
Right.
And if you're constantly with people that just love to drink and smoke and eat high fat foods and lots of sugary things, it's going to be really hard not to. I remember, now I'm not 100% vegan, but I'm pretty close. And I remember sitting at a wedding reception, and the food was served, and I was not served the big, whatever platter of meat. And a family member looked at me and said, "Oh no, don't tell me you're one of them." And that's my own family, right?
Right.
And I just said, "Hey, don't let my choices make you not enjoy what you're doing. Just dig into that plate. In fact, you can have the one that was supposed to be served to me. Enjoy. Because I don't like to make people uncomfortable just because I'm making healthy choices. But can you imagine, Frank, that in our society, if you're making healthy choices, people feel awkward to be around you. They don't want to eat with you because you're not going to dig into what they are. And I think maybe it's their conscience that's speaking to them, and they didn't want that, because food is such a great source of comfort and fun. And the last thing you want is somebody raining on your parade. I wanted to dig into this big rack of ribs and laugh and have fun with my friends. And here's this guy sitting at the table that's not partaking, And so, yeah, there's a lot of peer
But
pressure.
don't you think that will change over time, though?
It is changing.
Yeah, it's changing now. Right.
Especially if you live in certain parts of the country. If
Yeah.
you're living in California like we do, it's so easy to make a healthy choice. Even the unhealthy restaurants have their healthy menu, and it's just really normal and accepted. But when I traveled to, the South and such, where everything's about deep fried everything from hush puppies to catfish. And I was told in Jackson, Mississippi, got to try that catfish. It gets more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that, you've worked with several cancer survivors. What did they teach you about adding healthy years to your life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And in the documentary series, Healthy Long Life, we feature some testimonies of people that made the changes that they needed to make to extend their life. And all of them had victory over cancer, which is, a big deal. But on top of that, I've been working for the last 28 years at Oasis of Hope Hospital that was founded by my grandfather, Ernesto Contreras, in 1963. And in the early 60s, my grandfather was one of the only oncologists that was incorporating care for the body, mind, and spirit. And food and diet was such an important part. We even have rooftop gardens. And so we literally grow our own organic food, and we have a teaching area with a bar where a chef teaches our patients how to cook, because it's so important. And so there, it was really easy for me to interview a lot of patients. And I specifically interviewed 50 patients that were all cancer-free after having stage 4 cancer. So that's a big, big deal. And I said, I want to know the top 5 things that were important for you to beat cancer. And out of those top 5, I found that 48 out of my 50 patients interviewed had 2 things in common, which really got my attention. And that was faith and food. 40 out of 50 of my patients that survived cancer said, Daniel, I needed to turn to God. I just was overwhelmed. It's stage 4 cancer, and when your life is on the line, you contemplate spiritual issues. Who wouldn't? And so they said, I needed God. I had to trust in God. And then food. And they said, I absolutely was willing to make all the changes I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they all became plant-based diet people. They were just eating plants. But see, that topic is really, really important for boomers today, because everything that boomers are facing, from arthritis to diabetes to cancer to heart disease, and everything they want to prevent, has one thing in common. And that is, well, actually two things, but I want to talk about inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Inflammation is related to all chronic degenerative diseases. And what causes inflammation is this immune response. It's a healthy thing, except when it's chronic. And one of the nutrients that's most important, or proteins that's most important, that causes inflammation, is called NF-kappa B. And to not get really complex in the explanation, what I can tell you is that there are foods that promote NF-kappa B proliferation, which leads to lots of unwanted inflammation. And there are foods that inhibit the production of NF-kappa B. And well, it just happens to be that high sugar foods and refined carbs, donuts and breads and things like that, and saturated fats like in fried foods, French fries and margarine and things like that, all of that promote inflammation, which increase your probability of cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes, and of course obesity, because that's the other factor. It's inflammation, but obesity is like the gateway drug to all illness.
Right.
The number one thing you can do if you are a baby boomer and you want to feel better, if you have pain, or if you have a tendency and you see, oh, I am definitely going to be diabetic, I'm pre-diabetic now, there's so much that you can do. And the first thing, after quitting smoking, you have to quit smoking. They'll tell, everybody agrees on that. But the next thing is, you need to get your weight down to a healthy weight. And there's this term called the BMI, the body mass index. That's a good rule of thumb. It's not perfect, but it's a good rule of thumb. And if you can get your BMI below 25, which takes a lot to get there, it's not easy, you're really going to, it's going to be difficult to be diabetic, type 2 diabetic, if you have a BMI under 25, because to get there, you're going to have to be eating more of the plant food and less of the animal proteins. The animal proteins are just full of saturated fats, and there you have the promotion of NF-kappa B again. And so that's, how it all ties together. That was a mouthful that I just shared, Frank.
That's great information, though. So Daniel, we got to take a real quick break here just to recognize our sponsor. And when we come back in 30 seconds, we will address, I want you to share with people how they can get a hold of you, of course, but we also want to address if someone says, well, I just kind of have bad genes in my family, I just got to deal with it. How do you address that? So we're going to come back and talk about that, okay?
Great.
So I wanted to just remind everybody that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, an elder care consulting organization that has a national network of professionally trained and experienced local advisors to assist families in determining the right path for your loved ones. They'll discuss various long-term care options, whether it's in-home care, assisted living, memory care, or if you just need an advocate to get advice from, a local Senior Care Authority advisor can help you now. So for a free 30-minute consultation with an advisor right in your area, contact Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231, or you could go directly to the website at www.seniorcareauthority.com, and you could find an advisor in your area. We're back with Daniel Kennedy, who's a healthcare executive counselor, author, and filmmaker. So we've been talking about a lot of different things, but, something that's, let's just start out so I don't forget. Why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you, your website, and any contact information you'd like to share?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I try to keep it simple. We just have one website, And from there, you can find everything you need about us. It is healthylonglife.com. Of course, you put the 3 W's, right?
Right.
www.healthylife.com. And from there, there's these 2 buttons that you can click. One will take you right to the documentary series that's on Amazon Prime Video. And then there's another button for resources where you can get a free copy of my ebook. And you can get other things there, like we have a cooking app for iOS and Android that teaches you how to cook and has recipes that are healthy. So
That's great.
you can
So
get
that's
those resources.
www.healthylonglife.com.
That's right.
Okay, great. So, somebody might be listening to this podcast in the future. Okay. I mean, these podcasts stick around on the internet for quite a long time. Right now, while we're doing this interview, we are in the midst of COVID-19. All right. Hopefully, we're not going to be dealing with this in the future. And maybe when somebody's listening to this show, they're going to go, oh, I remember that, hopefully. But, how does what you've learned filming Healthy Long Life apply to COVID-19?
Yeah. So, like March of 2020, which seems so long ago, and yet it doesn't, because 2020 was just such an incredibly challenging year and long year. The order in California is given by Governor Newsom to shelter in place. And I'm sitting there with my family thinking, what do we do? And I have this documentary series on living healthy. And it occurs to me that I should film a bonus episode just about COVID-19. And I reach out to experts, and I was surprised how many people, did interviews for me, remotely. And so we put together a whole episode. And what came out from the experts, like I talked to Dr. T. Colin Campbell from Cornell University. I talked to Dr. Michael Greger, who wrote How Not to Die, which is one of the best-selling books on the New York Times bestseller list,
Right.
continues to be. I spoke to Dr. Hans Deal again. I spoke to Dr. Francisco Contreras, who I work with at Oasis of Hope. I spoke to Dr. Delia Garcia. I even spoke to a doctor in Italy who was on the front lines in northern Italy when that was the worst, epicenter after China. And I also spoke to a Dr. Eric Naputi, which is very, very interesting. Dr. Eric Naputi has been giving away zinc and vitamin D, with the science behind that. And he has I think he had 10 million views on a YouTube video where he's educating. So I just wanted to see, what can we do about COVID-19? And they brought something to my attention, which I hadn't really been reading about in the news, because in the news, what I was reading from Dr. Fauci and from the CDC is about how we need to social distance, we need to mask up, we need to wash our hands, and all of that is helping for sure. But what my experts brought up was the people that are not faring well when they do get COVID-19 are people with comorbidities. Okay, what's a comorbidity? That it sounds morbid, but why comorbidity?
Right.
The definition of a comorbidity, which plenty of your viewers or listeners already know, is that there's more than one underlying health issue going on. And so people that have cardiovascular disease, or people, especially people that are technically obese, people with diabetes, they're struggling much more if they do get COVID-19. So if we're sitting here saying, well, what do I want to do to lower my risk of COVID-19? The great news is what you need to do is lifestyle changes, and it's also going to help you in lowering your risk or managing all the other diseases we've been talking about. So getting that BMI down there, it actually correlates to faring better with COVID-19 and hopefully preventing it. And then another interesting thing that Dr. Campbell talked about, because he's the author of the famous China study, where Cornell University teamed up with Oxford and the Chinese academic group. For 20 years, they followed more than, I think it was like 60,000 people for 20 years to see the progression of disease. And part of the study identified what's going on with viruses that cause hepatitis B. And through eating a plant-based diet, there were less incidents of hepatitis C, in this group of or cohort in the study. And so he's hypothesizing that even plant-based diets help control our body's reaction to viruses. So this applies now for COVID-19, but it also applies, in the future for all disease. Lots of studies coming out that especially Dr. Eric Naputi has put the spotlight on is that most patients that have COVID-19 have a deficiency in vitamin D3 and zinc. And so he is absolutely helping. He has more than 250,000 people taking his vitamin D3 and zinc. Right. So those deficiencies are important.
Very, very interesting. So I could talk to you all day long. Unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes left, if that, a minute and a half or so. So I'm going to just leave you with this. I wanted to get to it. I mean, somebody that's listening going, oh, I just got a bad family history, bad genes. All right. How do you address people who say that to you?
Well, that's why I started to make this film, because I have a bad history. Grandma died of cancer. Dad had 3 cancers. Uncle died of pancreatic cancer. My aunt died 2 years ago of stage 4 melanoma. And what I found by talking to doctors like Dr. Michael Clapper, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Delia Garcia, an oncologist, is, and this is actually published, so look it up. Go on to the American Cancer Society and talk about genes in cancer. And out of all cancers altogether, only 10% of them were caused by bad genes. That's incredible. What we're inheriting is not bad genes. We're inheriting lifestyles that lead to illness. And so you have the power, if you're willing to embrace your life and make some changes. You need to be more active. So even in a pandemic, you can get out and breathe fresh air and hike, stop smoking, rest better, and try to eat more plant-based diet, cut way back on the animal fats and proteins and the sugars, and you absolutely will help promote your life and hopefully live a healthy, long life. You can override bad genes. Only 10% of all cancers are related to genes. I repeated myself because we've got to wake you up. You can't just say, I have bad genes. We all have bad genes.
Right.
But lifestyle is more powerful than genes.
Daniel Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. Check it out, www.healthylonglife.com. Thanks for joining us on Boomers Today, Daniel. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Boomers Today. Please be safe out there. We'll talk to everybody real soon.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.